Mike O'Hara from DetroitLions.com is with us. Hey, Mike, how you doing today, man?
Okay, Stick, D-Mac, and even you, Maz. Okay, even you.
Look at the dean.
You haven't left your house. You haven't left your house in a year, Mo.
I'm afraid of what's out there. I'm going to run out of toilet paper. That's what they told me.
It was a year ago that they told you about the toilet paper thing, but obviously this week you've been staying very busy. How did you keep up with all the news yesterday?
Talk to people like Maz who call all the time. No, there's ESPN and NFL.com, and there are a lot of sources that keep sort of a running track on it. And the Lions they've been more active in shedding players than they have been in signing players. So it's part of the gig and it's fun. It really is.
Joe Dahl, I know he didn't play a lot last year, but would you have let Joe Dahl go? Did he show you anything as a fifth-round pick?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that was Bob Quinn's first draft and maybe his best draft, really, because they took offensive linemen on the first three of the first five picks, and they all panned out to some degree, starting with Taylor Decker and Graham Glasgow, now who's still starting for Denver. And Joe was a good player, but he was a tackle in college, Washington State, and he was really a guard in the National Football League. And it took, it's a big conversion, changing positions like that. It doesn't seem like it. It just seems like big guys in there like moving furniture, but there's more to it than that. And Joe turned out to be a pretty good player, but he finally got his chance to start, and he just couldn't stay healthy. And I think the reason they released him is he flunked his physical.
Yeah.
Now that's not uncommon in the National Football League.
Hey, last year when they signed Danny Shelton, and I won't bring up Chase Daniel yet. I'll stay on Danny Shelton. A lot of people had raised their eyebrows on that signing. Today they let him go.
Yeah, former first-round draft pick, and really had a couple of good years. A good support player, really, more of a rotational player than what I would call a full-time starter. I know he started a lot of games, but he really wasn't. Let's put it this way: he wasn't Ndamukong Suh there in the middle, really creating havoc. But I thought he gave him some pretty decent play. But really, guys, you look at that offense and the way it deteriorated last year, and I mean just steadily. It was like the groceries, falling through the bottom of the sack. It just splat, and they couldn't stop anybody. So I don't think there are many people that could really make a great case for that. This is a guy we have to have back, and they got to get bigger, stronger, and more athletic up front there on the defensive line. They really do. That's a critical area, that whole front seven.
How about to your point, Mike, and thanks for joining us, is the fact that Shelton obviously not doing what Sue did, but the fact that they gave Romeo Okwara, they didn't franchise him, but they gave him a 3-year, $39 million contract. To me, that shows more of what they think of him moving forward. And is there somebody that's out there that maybe they have their eye on, like would be their prize for free agency? Is there somebody in particular, or is it more, I guess, the group of guys that'll come in with what they're trying to build culture-wise?
I think it's a combination of both there. The way they look at it. I don't think they're going to really try to ring the bell with anybody like they did, for example, 3 years ago with Trey Flowers, 5 years, $90 million. Look, he's been a good player, but I think everybody can agree, I should say, that he's not a $90 million player. But I think there was a guy out there, and this goes to show you how the market changes, a guy named Trey Headline. He's a defensive end out of New Orleans Saints. I think the Lions were looking at him. Of course, they had a connection there with Dan Campbell, who'd been there the last 5 years as their tight ends coach. But they negotiated with their own guy, and they really got probably the same player, Romeo Okwara, maybe even a little bit better. 3 years, $39 million compared to the 4 years, $60 million that Heinlein signed for. So I think what you try to do is leverage your own players or whoever you're bidding against or bidding with, and try to get the best deal for the best player you can. And I think the Lions did that with Okwara. He was one of only, I think only 9 other players or maybe 8 other players had double-digit sacks last year in the National Football League. Look, they're hard to come by the way quarterbacks drop back. I mean, look, there are no more 7-step drops and stand there and survey the field. It's 1, 2, 3, boom, and the ball is out. So you really got to get around the edge, get off the edge there to get to the quarterback. And Romeo did that pretty well. He had 7.5 sacks 2 years ago. Last year, 2019, was a down year for him, but they came back strong this year. And it wasn't just the sacks; it was the pressures, it was tackles for loss, all of that, all those metrics and stuff like that the football stats geeks look at. I wish I could remember it all, and I can't. But he was a really good ball player for him. And look, I think it helps to have his brother Julian, third-round draft pick out of Notre Dame last year, coming on for his second year after really spending most of his rookie year on the injured list.
Yeah, Mike, that was actually going to be my follow-up question, but you kind of just knocked it out of the park with that, was how much of his brother being here kind of led him into staying with the Lions. So I'll transition to this. When this administration, we'll call it, took over, they wouldn't use the word rebuild. They kept saying retool. Can we just all admit that this is an actual rebuild right now and they're doing it the right way?
Yeah, I think it's a rebuild to some degree. I don't know if it's a complete makeover, but I think it's, especially defensively, it is. And it's kind of turned out that way offensively to a degree because, look, they were pretty strong at wide receiver last year. Now it's a different thing. Look, they signed Tyrell Williams. It's spent some time with the Raiders and the Rams and the Chargers. But, with Kenny Galladay still out there in free agency, and who knows what he's going to get. I don't think the market is what he or the other receivers thought it was going to be. But I think a rebuild might be a little strong, but not too strong. Not at all.
Mo, I wanted to ask you about Kenny Galladay now that you bring him up. We heard all kinds of rumors that last year, not only did he have his injury, but he kind of changed as a person, as a player. He wasn't answering teammates' calls. He was coming late to work, sometimes not showing. All that said, I think I still would have signed him to the franchise tag. I would have kept him. You get a conditional third-round pick at best for him. What's your take on what Kenny Galladay did the last couple of years and where he's at right now?
Yeah, I think, he was a really, got to give Bob Quinn credit here for this one, too. That was a sharp pick at the bottom of the third round, a kid from Northern Illinois, a Chicago kid playing at St. Rita High School there in Chicago. And look, his first game in the National Football League, opening day of the 2017 season, Matthew Stafford went to him in like the first or second minute of the fourth quarter for the go-ahead touchdown against the Arizona Cardinals. And 3 minutes later, it's another touchdown catch. Really for the clinching touchdown. So he showed right early in his career, in fact, opening day of his career, he really had the potential to be a big-time player for the Detroit Lions. Now, he was hurt a lot his rookie year, came on his second year, and then his third year, 2019, I think he had 65 or 70 catches, but he led the league in touchdowns with 11 touchdown catches. The thing about Kenny, I don't think he was blazing fast or anything like that, but he was, 6'4", 215 with long arms and strong hands. And he came down with what they call those 50-50 balls. More often than not, he caught more than his share. It was probably when he was going for the ball, it was something like 80-20. I don't disagree with either side what they've done in this negotiation. If I were Kenny Galladay, I would want to negotiate. If I were the Lions, I probably would not have put the franchise tag on him, because if you really don't want to do that and you put the tag on him and he signs it, you're stuck. You've got him. And he's got you for, $16.5 million. You look at the market now, it really hasn't been as strong for wide receivers as people think. And I think part of that is that if you draft like for the Detroit Lions at number 7, if they draft a wide receiver, and I looked at this, with the rookie wage scale, the player drafted 7th overall, and it's by slot, it's not by position, it's where you're drafted, would get a 4-year contract of $23 million guaranteed.
Wow.
That's a lot less than the 3 years that the guy from Carolina signed for, big money. So there's a reason to do that if you think you can get a comparable player. And this looks like another strong year for wide receivers. It was Corey Davis, by the way, the player I was thinking about.
With the Jets.
Yeah, no, exactly. And which was something Maz and I were talking about, is that I wouldn't have been mad if they would have signed him here. But speaking of wide receiver or whatever, in Mike O'Hare's eyes, who's covered this team as much
since the Kennedy administration,
exactly. In this, is there a player out there, either in the draft or free agency, that Detroit needs to have with what they're building that you see? Whether it is a wide receiver, Jamar Chase, or a Devontae Parker, or is it somebody that's out there, or is it something that's going to take over time, and maybe it's not until next year's draft or the year after's draft?
Well, Derry, that's a great question, and I think coaches are allowed to develop players. They don't all have to just come to your team, especially rookies, as the finished product, and all of a sudden turn your franchise around. Now, look, it happens more often sometimes like with a running back or a great pass rusher. But just getting a guy in the draft, I think it's unrealistic to think that he's going to come in on his own and change your team immediately. But there's a guy I like, and I've been on him. I've done 3 mock drafts now, I think, and it's Micah Parsons, linebacker from Penn State. Now, he opted out last year because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I asked the general manager, Brad Holmes, if they, how he regards players who opted out. And he says, look, you can't punish them there. If they're good players, they're good players. Guys take a year off. They have a reason for doing it. You want to ask them why they did it and all that. But this kid is really, he's probably the best defensive player on the board. And I just think that he's a value pick at number 7. He gives you a good player at a position, the front 7 defensively, where you need a good player. Now, you can go further down in the draft and get a pass rusher, an edge rusher they call them. But I think it's more problematic, and I just think that the pass fail quotient there. I think with edge rushers going from college to the National Football League, it's pretty chancy because you don't always get the same player in the NFL that you thought you were getting from the college ranks.
Mo, one more before we let you go. I wanted to talk to you about the new regime with the Lions. Chris Spielman, a friend of ours, a guy that you've done many hours of work with on Zoom and on podcasting and all of that. And you get a guy like Brad Holmes, and you got your rookie coach in Dan Campbell, and he brings all these other coaches in, Anthony Lynn, Deuce Staley. All your years of covering the Lions, have you seen something like this come together as well as this seems to have come together?
Well, I have to go back a long way, guys. In 1978, when Monty Clark took over as the head coach, he brought in a lot of guys who with playing experience, and been good players. Offensive coordinator Bob Schnelker, his linebacker coach was Marty Schottenheimer.
Oh.
And everybody knows Monty won 200 games, so we kind of forget about that. And he didn't have 20 assistant coaches either in those days. They had 10 or 12, so you're not going to have just the sheer numbers. But in terms of maybe the percentages and all of that, I think Monty did a lot, pretty much the same thing. But what Dan Campbell has done to me is, and it's what I would have done really, I believe in having ex-players as coaches if they're in coaching, not just bring in 6 guys who just retired and say, okay, let's try to coach. No, these are professional coaches. Deuce Staley, Anthony Flynn. You can go right down the list of all of them. They are. You can even go to the assistant head coach and all those guys.
Aaron Glenn.
All these names are just banging around in my head right now, but there's so many of them. You've got 8 guys there now are former players in the National Football League, and I think there's some value to that. In fact, we were just on a Zoom interview today with Josh Hill, the tight end that they signed from New Orleans, and he said, New Orleans Saints, and he said, look, he said it's good to have a position coach who played the game. Look, Josh Hill's played 8 years in the league. Dan Campbell was a 10-year tight end in the National Football League. And he just talked about some of the things that Dan Campbell taught him. And really, you can look at all the film you want and all that. And there are coaches who've been successful with not loading up their staff with ex-players. Bill Belichick, the chief among them. But there is something to having ridden those buses and those trips and sitting around the locker room after a loss or a win and all that, looking at film together with the guys and just sort of having that relationship player to player. And I think if you do it the right way and you have the smart guys who are in a leadership role, I think it can benefit them. And I expect them to benefit from that with the Detroit Lions. And by the way, I'm referring to this right now. For now, as the Renaissance regime, but we'll see if it lasts.
I love that. I
like it.
And I love the fact that he brought up Monty Clark, too, because that's the last really great head coach we've had here. I mean, you can give it to Fonts, but Monty's it, man.
Hey, I've got one picture of him, and it's him holding his hands in front of him, praying that kick that Eddie Murray hit in San Francisco would have went in, but it did not, Mo. And I'm sure you were that candlestick that day.
The 31st, 1983.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, you guys mentioned Chris Spielman. I just want to tell a quick story. The first time I ever met Darren McCarty, we were at one of those joints over there down by the river. He was off that. He wasn't playing. He had a cast on your hand, I think it was, or a sling or something like that. And I asked you, and I just introduced. I says, "By the way, what happened to you?" And you said, "I tried to pull a Chris Spielman." I've never forgotten that.
Absolutely. Which it goes to, which this, Mike, and we always appreciate all the time you have, is because you're as much of the culture of this city and explain it, and that's why I love to go to you, because I've been following you since I've been 5 years old, bro. So I mean, I appreciate that, and to be anytime I get in Chris Spielman's story. Even if I put myself there, it's a good thing. So thanks, bud.
Yeah,
and it was probably Dunleavy's or Andrews.
I was just going to say it was Dunleavy's.
R.I.P. Jackie.
I even think Jack was still there, but it was still early.
Sean, yeah, no doubt.
I just want to tell you, the one man I could talk horse racing with in this city, in this state, is Mike O'Hara. And you know what he did for me years ago? Here's a guy that used to cover the horse racing beat, went to Derbies, went to Preaknesses, went to Belmont Stakes. He gave me his collection of programs racing with and betting tickets from back in the day when I think it was Seattle Slew, 1977. Am I correct on that, Mo?
Seattle Slew in 77, affirmed in 78, yeah.
And, Mike, you wonder why he won't stop calling you 3 times a day, bro. You did it to yourself. That's why he's Detroit's dad, Tom Mazaway. I love it.
Darren, it's not calling up to say thank you. It's calling up asking for more.
Of course it is, but we know that. Look, hey, you're smart. You got to actually stay in there, and where there is toilet paper, I'm out here, so I haven't learned quite enough from you yet, but I'm still learning, but I appreciate your time.
Yeah, what an absolute encyclopedia of all great things to happen in Detroit and all non-great things to happen for the Detroit Lions. And anybody who's been a beat writer for the Lions for that long, you have put yourself through the trials and tribulations. And thank you so much for joining The Hook this afternoon. Make sure you go to DetroitLions.com and read Mike O'Hara's articles. And thank you so much for coming on The Hook today.
Mo.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me. It's been a great run. It really has.
Yeah,
Awesome.
It's amazing, man. I would love to talk to that guy for like 70 hours.
You can. I have him over at least once a year. Used to be more than that back in the day, but wild card weekend, O'Hara's at my house. We're eating whatever, and we're just having a great time. I mean, I love the guy.
Well, we got more NFL football talk coming up next. Still free agents available that the Patriots didn't buy, and we'll go over all those guys next on The Hook.